Hello and welcome to Security Analysis. This is a weekly program on security issues, which is part of the Bharata First platform. I am Uday Bhaskar. This program, as the name suggests, will review contemporary security issues in an informed and objective manner. The aim is to shed some light and add to our understanding of developments in the strategic and security domain that are relevant to India and the region. This week, the focus is on a rather tragic incident: the loss of the Indonesian submarine KRI Nanggala off the Bali island in end April. This ill-fated submarine was reported missing, or as the naval signal goes, sub-miss, on April 21st during a live torpedo training exercise, and on Sunday, April 25th, the worst was confirmed. The Indonesian authorities indicated that debris from the submarine had been located and reached that conclusion which all sailors fear: subsunk. 53 lives were lost. We commiserate with the Indonesian Navy and offer deep condolences to the families of the crew of the Nanggala. To discuss how this tragic incident may have taken place, because we do not have any official confirmation from Indonesia, and what could be envisioned to deal with such exigencies in the future, we have a very distinguished panel with us today. Allow me to welcome and introduce Admiral Arun Prakash, former Chief of the Naval Staff, former Chairman of our Chiefs of Staff Committee in India, and also he has been member of India's National Security Advisory Board. Arun sir, welcome.
Thank you.
We also have with us Commodore Anil Jay Singh. He is a veteran submariner. He has had 5 commands at sea. 4 of them were on submarines. And he is currently the Vice President of the Indian Maritime Foundation. Welcome, AJ.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'm also very glad to welcome and introduce Commander Arun Jyoti. Arun Jyoti is an electrical officer. He took premature retirement from the Navy. He is now in the corporate sector. He served on both streams as far as the Indian Navy submarines are concerned: the former Soviet Union, now Russia, the acquisitions from Moscow, and the boats that India acquired from West Germany, the HDW. Incidentally, Arun Jyoti is also an archivist and has been maintaining the equivalent of a sociological history of the Indian Navy's submarine arm. Welcome, Arun Jyoti.
Thank you, sir.
Let me turn to Commodore AJ first. Anil, if I could request you to walk us through the incidents or what may have happened between Wednesday and Sunday, from submiss to subsunk. If you could just conjecture what may have happened. AJ?
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you for inviting me to this discussion. It was indeed a very tragic incident that happened between the 21st and 24th of April when the Indonesian submarine Nanggala, pennant number 402, was reported missing on the 21st and thereafter declared sunk with no survivors on the 24th. And various plausible reasons for this incident are being discussed across social media and various other submarine groups by experts and former submariners. And these range from total power failure. It could some opine that it could be an internal battery explosion due to saltwater ingress, or an internal torpedo explosion because she was going in for a live torpedo firing. However, I think an internal explosion, in my opinion, seems unlikely, sir, because had it been an internal explosion, there would have been some indication to the ships in company that an explosion had taken place. You may recall that when the Argentinian submarine San Juan had sunk 3 years ago, subsequently it was reported by an American seismic station that an underwater explosion had been heard. And it was, and after the submarine was salvaged, it was found that she had suffered an implosion within and therefore sunk. So whatever happened obviously caused the submarine to gain depth very rapidly. And it was perhaps so rapid and perhaps a total power failure that even the redundancy, inbuilt redundancy in the systems and the backup systems failed, which did not give any time for the submarine or the crew to react. What actually happens on a submarine in such circumstances, the submarine is plunged into darkness. It starts rapidly gaining depth. In this case, perhaps had she just dived, she would have been maintaining perhaps a down angle of up to 5 degrees. Even at a moderate speed of dive, she would have been at a speed of about 5 knots, which means that if you extrapolate that into a depth of 850 meters where she was ultimately found, the submarine crew would have had a reaction time of less than 3 minutes to salvage the boat.
When they descend from about 500 meters, which is the ultimate, the depth that is recommended, and they went down to 850. So
yes,
it's all 3 minutes, that period.
So in less than 3 minutes, and en route, while plunging to that depth, the submarine would have been rapidly crossing various dangerous parameters in terms of depth, 100 meters, 200 meters, 250, 300, for which she's probably designed, and very rapidly exceeded 500 meters, which is the crushing depth of the boat, and finally probably broke before it hit bottom at 850. So there was actually no time for the crew to react, to be able to take any corrective action.
So AJ, I'm just trying to summarize what you had said. This is for the benefit of our viewers, to say that the depth that the submarine can go up to is 500 meters. And what they found was that the debris was at 850 meters or so, which is the boat would have broken. But let me request Admiral Arun Prakash to come in here. Arun sir, if you could share your thoughts about, again, as I said, the tragic submarine incident, and what could be done for a future exigency in terms of the regional cooperation or the regional effort. Arun sir?
Well, first of all, let me join you in offering commiserations to our friends in the Indonesian Navy for the loss of 53 gallant lives. Now, submarining is no less or no more hazardous than other professions. In fact, I would say it's safer because the people involved in operating submarines are highly professional, well-trained, and highly motivated, and they take their job very seriously. But accidents do happen. And in such instances, it is important to firstly locate the scene of the accident. And secondly, having located the scene of the submiss, then to get on with the rescue operations. Now, in our part of the world, the Indian Ocean, there are 6, to the best of my knowledge, 6 submarine operating nations: Iran, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Indonesia. And we've been exceedingly lucky that for 50 to 60 years, we've operated submarines without owning a submarine rescue vessel, which is a highly specialized vessel. But obviously, luck has run out, and the first accident is unfortunately in the Indonesian Navy. So it is important, as pointed out by Commodore Jay Singh, that we need to have an understanding with navies which own this specialized capability of going to the rescue of a submarine in distress, which is exactly what happened. But perhaps a more formal kind of arrangement needs to be struck, at least in the Indian Ocean and perhaps across the Indo-Pacific. The second point is that the intensity of submarine operations is going up very rapidly. China is producing submarines by the day. Countries are acquiring submarines, and although it may seem remote, but there have been submarine collisions even underwater. And therefore, we need to evolve some kind of rules of the game by which, the passage of submarines, at least on the high seas, is known or regulated in some way. So all said and done, between accidents and collisions and so on, I think whichever country owns a submarine rescue facility needs to make it known and needs to make it available to all, because the fraternity of the sea is the bond is very strong, and this is a humanitarian cause, and we need to do something formal about it. And perhaps right across, to start with the Indian Ocean and then right across the Indo-Pacific.
Sir, on this, can I, just ask you to perhaps consider what could be the most appropriate forum? For instance, you had identified 6 navies, Indian Ocean littorals, who have submarines. Would the IONS be an appropriate forum for this kind of cooperation? We also have to consider capacity. Can we bring in navies that have the capacity to be part of such an effort?
Well, you don't need all navies to have the capacity. That's the whole point. It's a very expensive and it requires a lot of expertise. So as long as one navy has the capacity, what I'm saying is that that navy should be big-hearted enough to make that capacity available to everybody or anybody who is in distress. So in the Indian Ocean itself, we've got Singapore and India. So across, IONS is a good forum. I mean, it's got a large membership, many of whom own submarines. So IONS would be a good point to start. We can offer and we can rope in Indonesia, Australia, other navies which own Japan. So your suggestion is a good one. IONS can put this on the table.
So I think this would be an interesting kind of policy matter that could be flagged, that perhaps IONS could have a formal structure in the event such an exigency occurs again. But let me turn to you, Arun Jyoti. You have served on both the German boats, the West German boats, the same HTW family, as also the former Soviet, the Kilo class. So you're an electrical officer. So can you just help us to, again, as I said, understand some of the technical aspects that when you have a complete power failure, which may have been one of the causes, as Commodore AJ pointed out, can you just help us to walk through the images that would perhaps unfold in a submarine in such a precarious situation? Arun?
Thank you very much, sir. And it's really an honor to be part of this August gathering here. And sincere apologies to the Indonesian Navy. And a pall of gloom happens all over the world when a submarine goes down, because we are a very limited fraternity across the globe. Sir, to your point that what would have happened on this submarine, if we look at the background, this is a 44-year-old boat. It's a Type 209 design of the German Navy. Very, very robust boats. I've personally served on board these submarines, and they do not have many redundancies involved on board these platforms, because they are so beautifully designed that they are supposed to actually retrieve themselves in case of a emergency. I've personally faced an emergency on board one of the SSKs, as we call them, and I remember that we just pulled ourselves up when we were absolutely down. So the boat has got its own inbuilt mechanisms to safeguard itself. Now, coming to the point that what could have happened on this boat, and I agree with perfectly with the Commodore AJ, sir, that when this boat started going down, it would have sunk like a stone. From a 40 meters to an 800 meters, the crew just wouldn't have got enough breathing time or enough reaction time. The boat had the capability to take in 39 people. It was with 53 people. That means that the weight dispositions on this submarine could have been an issue. In 2012, the last refit, when it was done in South Korea, they have replaced the engines. What were the weights of these boat and how they were altered, whether the original equipment manufacturer was involved, and look at the scenario of an Indonesian Navy. It has gaps in its submarine induction programs. So a submarine comes let's say in 1980s, and then the next submarine comes after another 20-25 years, and there's a gap in training, there's a gap in operational philosophy. It also does affect in the reaction time of the crew, because a crew which goes down or which dives a submarine has to be absolutely alert, and like the time which we mentioned, about 3 minutes. If there was a complete power failure on this submarine, everyone would have been in a blindfolded situation. And in those situations, the actions have to be very, very precise. Unfortunately, if on this submarine there was a hull failure, then the kind of water force that would have come inside would have actually crippled the crew within no time. And what we see now on the surface of the sea, the boat is lying in 3 parts, and that means that the water pressure has actually kind of twisted and turned this submarine and ripped it apart. So I think it was a very it would have been a very tragic end, and I think the crew wouldn't have got much time to do much about it, because they couldn't even use their high pressure air to pull the boat up, because this is a 1300-ton submarine, and in 1300-ton submarines the residual buoyancy is very, very less. It is just about 9%. These boats dive very quickly, and with the high pressure air which is on board, and it was going through a live torpedo firing, so it means the crew would have topped up everything before they would have done that dive. So these are certain important factors, and I think the navies across the Indian Ocean region would have to factor that their submarines are old and they cannot use them as brand new submarines. They need to factor that very, very closely, because the operational philosophies are advancing. The age of the submarines is actually going back. That is my submission, sir.
Thank you very much, Commander Jyoti. I think some of these technical aspects are very valuable for those who do not quite know the entire submarine ethos and how submarines operate underwater. I gather you have another appointment, so I'll thank you and request you to join us again, perhaps on another issue which would be relevant to your domain expertise. We'll take a short break here. Welcome back. We are now joined by Surgeon Commander Arun Sani, retired. He was in the Indian Navy, an underwater medicine specialist who served in both the Soviet acquisition and the West German boats, trained in the former Soviet Union. And after leaving the Navy, he has now joined the private sector, and he is in the Apollo Hospital, where he is looking after India's first hyperbaric facility for underwater and related issues. So welcome, Tarun Sani, Commander Sani, for joining this discussion. What I wanted to request you is to walk us through, from your perspective, what could have been the mood on that submarine in the few minutes from the time they lost control to the very tragic end. Tarun?
Thank you, Uday. I think at the outset, really condolences to the Indonesian Navy and the family of the submarine. And I think any submarine read that news today, and I think news like this travels really fast. You know, our hearts went out to each and every member of the crew, because we as submariners, every time you walk onto a submarine, you know that you've been prepared in your brain that, you know, there could be a day when you probably would be unable to manage and may not come back. It's like an Air Force pilot going on a mission and being not sure whether he is going to come back. When we look at the profile of the crew there and the mood of the crew, most of the crew in our assessment, when we select the crew for submarines, they undergo a very, very strict psychological profiling and also physiological profiling. So these guys are tough. They're physically tough. They can sustain lack of oxygen for prolonged periods of time. They're psychologically tough so that they don't panic in situations like that. And all of us who served on submarines have been prepared. You know, you do have regular exercises on board of, you know, loss of electrical failure, loss of gas, loss of this thing. So we are all mentally and physically trained to be prepared for exigencies of this kind. In the current context, what I feel is that, you know, there was probably just no react. Within from 40 meters, you were down to 800 meters even before you realized it. And from a crew's perspective, I think that was, I mean, it's sort of almost morbid, but that was a better way to go. I mean, had you been lying on the bottom of the sea for days together, you know, running out of oxygen and slowly feeling the, you know, your life. So maybe in a morbid manner, this was better. You know, it just happened so abruptly. Before you knew it, it was done and it was gone. So they did not have any time to react. In a conventional scenario, you know, all crew are told how to manage hypoxia, restrict movement on the board, don't move from left to right, preserve your oxygen, don't let too much carbon dioxide build up. But I don't think this particular incident gave the crew any opportunity for that. And like I said, in a morbid way, maybe it was a much better way to meet your end.
Thank you, Tarun. I think, you know, that again is a succinct kind of explanation about what may have happened and what could how the crew would have perhaps faced those last few minutes. But let me turn to Commodore AJ again. Anil, one of the points made by Admiral Prakash when he was recalling what may have happened and the current pattern of submarine deployment in the Indian Ocean. One of the issues is that not only do we have a higher incidence of countries acquiring and operating submarines which are manned, we also have unmanned submersibles. Now, in terms of the probability that there could be certain unforeseen incidents, how do you look at this technological kind of now development, that not only is it the manned submarine, but it's also the unmanned submersible that is being increasingly used? At least the most advanced navies are investing there. What do you think will happen to the management of water spaces?
So this is a subject that has been coming up for discussion repeatedly in submarine conferences all over the world, because particularly in the Indo-Pacific and more so east of the Malacca Straits, there's been a proliferation of submarines. But in the entire Indo-Pacific, there are at the moment 14 navies operating submarines. Besides those which, extra-regional powers like France, UK, Russia, their submarines are also in these waters. So water space management, particularly in the littoral waters of Southeast Asia, is a real challenge, sir. And as the Admiral mentioned, there have been instances of some very close shaves off and on between submarines. But unfortunately, notwithstanding how much ever we might want to introduce water space management or sharing of information, submarine deployment is something that not many navies would like to share with another navy, even if it's a peacetime routine passage. You may recall, so in 2009, a British SSBN and a French SSBN narrowly touched each other. In fact, they did touch each other just off the English Channel. This is despite England and France having an understanding that they would keep each other informed of their SSBN movements in those restricted waters. So this is a challenge we've got to address. But more important than that, sir, is that one of the benefits of having so many navies operating in the region is that an understanding of submarine operations and the submarine operating philosophy is better understood by most countries in the region now, which have navies, which automatically improves things like response times in case of submarine emergencies, etc. The problem in submarine escape and rescue is time criticality. Notwithstanding the presence of lots of DSRVs and submarine rescue capabilities, if they are not in close vicinity of where the submarine is sunk, despite the best efforts like happened in this case, the Singaporeans sent their DSRV, India sailed its DSRV, Malaysia sent its DSRV, but all of them arrived on the scene almost 3 days later. The Indian and Malaysians hadn't even reached there by then with their DSRVs because of the distance involved. India had to transit 2,500 nautical miles. So that is the actual challenge. The USA has a facility, a flyaway kit based at San Diego, and they assure you that in 48 hours, they can be at the scene of a submarine accident. But in the case of that, it is not about the USA being able to transport their equipment. It's about that country, the host country, having the wherewithal to thereafter deploy that equipment to the scene of the distress submarine. So that is where the challenge lies. And this, I think, with more and more discussions, more and more a deeper understanding through various multilateral mechanisms or maritime multilateral mechanisms, like you mentioned, IONS or WPNS, could perhaps be one of the subjects that can be refined over the years now that this has become a very live, the Indonesian submarine sinking is a live issue now. It's something that has affected everybody. The second issue, sir, is on this submarine, there was no time for them to release any of their distress signals. Every submarine is fitted with an emergency indicator buoy. This submarine did not even have time to release their emergency indicator buoy, which would have pinpointed the position of the submarine. And if the submarine or for that matter, the crew did not have time to effect a free escape. Even if their escape equipment, in whatever state, they would still have managed to break surface. So this obviously reinforces the fact that there just wasn't enough reaction time for the crew. And as Surgeon Commander Tarun Sani said, it was probably just a matter of seconds or minutes, and it was all over for them, unfortunately.
Let me ask Admiral Arun Prakash. Arun sir, we spoke about IONS, and AJ just mentioned that the United States has this capacity to reach any point within 48 hours. Is there a case for the Quad nations and, let me say, like-minded nations who are now part of the Indo-Pacific to look at some degree of cooperation as far as submarine accidents or any underwater incident is concerned. Is there a case for that, or is the geopolitics too complicated for us to consider that as an option? Arun sir?
As I had mentioned earlier, for 50 years, the Indian Navy operated submarines without owning a submarine rescue facility. For about 10, 15 years, we had an arrangement with the Americans that they would come to our help. In fact, I remember that when the President of India insisted on having a sortie on a submarine, we had to have a special arrangement for that flyaway kit to be here within 24 hours. So we have managed, you can manage, but the problem with submarine operations is that it's surrounded by secrecy. If we go back to the Russian major accident with Kursk, the Kursk had an explosion on board, a torpedo exploded, it sank. The Russians at that point of time did not have adequate rescue or search facilities. The whole world was offering to help, but with obviously hidden intent that they would have access to a top secret Russian submarine. The Russians denied access to everybody till they ran out of options, and I think after 2 or 3 days only did they permit the British and Norwegians to get access to the Kursk, and that's how the submarine was raised. So the idea is it sounds very good that we can have a common or a pooled resource for rescue and search and rescue, but each country will have reservations because submarine operations is a highly guarded and secret affair, and nobody would like you to have first access to their submarine. The Indonesians are the oldest operators of submarines. They were the first ones to acquire submarines in the early 60s, well before us. So they should have no dearth of experience. But again, there is an inherent reluctance to reveal your submarine operating procedures and so on. So I don't think it will work out like that. What the best we can do is to make your own facility available should they want to utilize it. I think that's the best we can do. And in this case, it did happen. 3-4 countries rushed their DSRVs. Unfortunately, they were not in time to do anything substantial.
Thank you, Arun sir. I think this, as I said earlier, is a very tragic incident. Submarine accidents are rare, but when they do happen, it is very, very, I would say, enormity of the tragedy is something that the parent Navy and the entire seafaring community also empathizes with. But there are many, I would say, complexities here. The platform itself, the submarine, is all about stealth and secrecy. So I'd like to thank our guests, Admiral Arun Prakash, Commodore Anil Jay Singh, Surgeon Commander Tarun Sani, and Commander Arun Jyoti for sharing their thoughts with us on this incident. There are a few, I would say, policy issues that could be considered. For instance, can the IONS be a forum for sharing some of the expertise and some of the kind of emergency measures that could be considered in the event of a similar exigency? But these are issues that will have to be taken up by the navies and the countries involved. On that note, we offer our condolences again to the Indonesian Navy. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of this show. We will come back again with another program very soon.